Righty, so we're still going to have some people coming in and warming up the chat, but I will go ahead and get us started. So I am Jaleesa Davis, CNP coordinator here at the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. We're so glad that you all could join us for today's live event. And I'm glad you all are warming up the chat. Please keep doing that throughout. You're also going to have the opportunity to ask your questions in the chat, so feel free to drop those throughout the time that you're here. All right. And so now for today, just to give you all a little bit of intro before we officially start. So today's session is going to be brought to you by the Association of CNPs. It's the professional organization of the certified nonprofit professionals. And one way that our association supports its membership is through free sessions like these, talking about relevant topics within the sector. So these events are always free, thanks to supporters and viewers like you. We would love if you all would support us, continue to support us so that these events can be free. In the chat, you'll see some links that'll pop up, so you'll be able to see how you can support. You can learn about upcoming events that we have, webinars similar to this, and go ahead and mark your calendars. And then without much more to share, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our live webinar speaker, Ms. Barb Perez. So a little bit about Ms. Barb Perez. So her mission is to create a lasting impact by helping others turn obstacles into opportunities and thrive in their personal and professional lives. So she has over 20 years of nonprofit experience, and she's also not only one of our very own ACNPs, but she's also our professional track facilitator for our courses that we offer. And she is also the owner of Another Point of View. So without further delay, welcome and thank you, Ms. Barb Perez.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am Barb Perez. I am a nonprofit professional, resilience coach, founder of Another Point of View with Barb. And as Jaleesa said, have spent over 20 years leading teams, building programs, fundraising for causes that matter, from grassroots organizations to national nonprofits. Like many of you, I've done this work with heart, hustle, and purpose. I am an ACNP, as Jaleesa said, and then we've already done my introduction, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time there. But I am going to tell you that I've watched funders question salaries. I've watched funders undervalue expertise, and people that are outside of our sector assume that our work is easier, less professional, or I've seen the toll that it's taken when we start to begin to believe those things for ourselves. That stops here, and that stops today. If you've balanced those tight budgets, if you've led through those crises, or if you have built programs that change lives, you are a leader. You're strategic and you are skilled. This conversation today is about realignment between what we give and what we receive, between our impact and how we're recognized. So whether you are an executive director, program manager, or you are the behind the scenes glue that holds it all together, you belong here. So let's challenge the narrative, let's claim our space, and let's redefine our worth together. So let's jump in and let's get started. So I want to talk about today's agenda. So I already talked about we're going to reframe the narrative. But first, whiplash, right? Like, we're going to talk about that. We're going to review the data. We're not here for fluff. We're here to unpack the real challenges that we face, and we're going to back it up with solid data, sector trends, and skills that are often overlooked and undervalued. We're going to look at reframing the leadership narrative, review what the data on pay, burnout, and workforce trends really look like. Together, we're going to identify competencies that nonprofit leaders bring to the table and the importance of them. This is about showing up differently, not just for your organization, but for yourself. We're going to talk about real talk about why our sector is undervalued. And then, because I'm not going to leave you high and dry, I won't leave you without strategies to equip yourself to be able to advocate for yourself so that you can move as a sector from passion to power and to claim our worth with confidence. Because when you advocate for your own worth, you make space for others to do the same. So let's get to it. So I'm going to jump right in with both feet because, well, that's why we're here and that's me. So let's stop pretending that everything is just fine, right? The financial landscape for nonprofits is shaky at best, right? Individual giving is down, costs are up, and because we're asked to deliver massive community impact with shrinking resources, and because we have videos like this one, we're going to try this. We're going to try to do this. It's not going to work, so we're going to go the other way. Hold on. Nope.
So in the for-profit sector, the more value you produce, the more money you can make. But we don't like nonprofits to use money to incentivize people to produce more in social service. We have a visceral reaction to the idea that anyone would make very much money helping other people. Interesting that we don't have a visceral reaction to the notion that people would make a lot of money not helping other people. You know, you want to make $50 million selling violent video games to kids, go for it. We'll put you on the cover of Wired magazine, but you want to make $500,000 trying to cure kids of malaria, and you're considered a parasite yourself. And we think of this as our system of ethics, but what we don't realize is that this system has a powerful side effect, which is it gives a really stark, mutually exclusive choice between doing very well for yourself and your family or doing good for the world to the brightest minds coming out of our best universities, and sends tens of thousands of people who could make a huge difference in the nonprofit sector, marching every year directly into the for-profit sector because they're not willing to make that kind of lifelong economic sacrifice. Business Week did a survey, looked at the compensation packages for MBAs 10 years out of business school. And the median compensation for a Stanford MBA with bonus at the age of 38 was $400,000. Meanwhile, for the same year, the average salary for the CEO of a $5 million plus medical charity in the US was $232,000, and for a hunger charity, $84,000. Now, there's no way you're going to get a lot of people with $400,000 talent to make a $316,000 sacrifice every year to become the CEO of a hunger charity. Some people say, well, that's just because those MBA types are greedy. Not necessarily. They might be smart. It's cheaper for that person to donate $100,000 every year to the hunger charity, save $50,000 on their taxes, so still be roughly $270,000 a year ahead of the game, now be called a philanthropist because they donated $100,000 to charity, probably sit on the board of the hunger charity, indeed probably supervise the poor SOB who decided to become the CEO of the hunger charity, and have a lifetime of this kind of power and influence and popular praise still ahead of them.
This thing called planning has been around for
Stop.
a long.
So I did that right. I just didn't do this part right. Right. So let's go back to that. So that video tells us, I lost my notes. We planned this. We did. We worked this all out and it worked just fine. But we're going to move right on. So let's talk about those MBAs for a second, right? Quick poll. Everybody here, if you'll just take a quick second and what's your highest level of education? Just go ahead and pop that right in there. You can, right on your screen, answer that question. You should be able to. Can you? Is that also not working? Can't see the chat.
It's working. It's working very well. We have master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, PhDs.
Perfect. Thank you for answering that. I still cannot see my notes. So we're going to pause for just 1 second as we get my notes back. Ladies and gentlemen, Perfect. Okay. All right. All right. So thank you all for taking that poll. So, before, obviously I did these before I did my slides before we came in here today. So my guess was that many of us had advanced degrees or some degrees, like some sort of schooling, right, prior to coming into the nonprofit sector. So my guess was about half, right? So how close was I with that, Jaleesa? About half? Yes, no?
That
maybe?
seems about right. Yeah, about half.
Okay. So there is this sort of common misconception out there that nonprofit leaders are somehow less skilled or less ambitious than their for-profit counterparts. This misconception can create real consequences when it comes to compensation and professional recognition, right? So let's talk about what the data really says. All right. So this isn't really about greed. It's about equity. If you're managing that multi-million-dollar budget, leading teams and transforming communities, you deserve to be compensated, right? So back to that MBA, right? The problem isn't that that MBA went to that for-profit company. The problem is that that MBA isn't really giving that difference of that $100,000 to that nonprofit. Because if they were, we wouldn't be having the conversations that we're having in that nonprofit space, right? We wouldn't be having the conversations that we're having about shoestring budgets and not being able to sort of pay our staff what they're worth and living, paycheck to paycheck in our nonprofit spaces, right? We wouldn't be having those conversations. But nonprofit work is frequently viewed through this romanticized lens of this selfless labor of love, rooted in passion and compassion and community service. And while hard work is absolutely at the center of why we do what we do, that perception often oversimplifies the complexity of our work. It frames nonprofit roles as driven by goodwill rather than grounded in professional expertise. Society often perceives nonprofit work as that labor of love rather than professional required specialized skills. This mindset shows up in a lot of subtle ways and many not so subtle ways, as well as those assumptions that nonprofit employees should work long hours, low pay, have leadership roles that require the same business acumen as corporate ones, or that fundraising, program development, and community engagements are just feel-good extras rather than strategic skill incentives and responsibilities. The result? Chronic underinvestment in nonprofit leadership. Leaders are expected to do more with less compensation, fewer resources, and limited access to ongoing professional development. Talent is too often lost to burnout, to sectors that offer better pay, greater prestige, and even if the impact is similar or less profound. Let's dive into why this perception is not only inaccurate, but it's harmful. Because redefining that narrative around nonprofit leadership is essential if we want to build sustainable organizations that truly move the needle in our communities. Let's take a closer look at why this perception that nonprofit work is that labor of love, it's deeply harmful. When we reduce nonprofit leadership to a passion project rather than a professional, we unintentionally justify practices that would be unacceptable in any other sector, like underpaying experienced professionals, deprioritizing leadership development, or expecting people to sacrifice their own well-being for the cause. But here's the truth. The success of a nonprofit doesn't happen by accident. It's not just heart that makes it happen. It's strategy. It's navigating complex funding landscapes, managing risk, building cross-sector partnerships, and leading teams through uncertainty and creating measurable impact with limited resources. If we continue to undervalue our nonprofit leaders, we also risk stunting the very progress that we claim to care about: housing stability, educational equity, and mental health access, social justice. These things don't move forward without strong, well-supported leaders behind them. Let's talk competencies. Do these sound familiar? These are the same skills that you get in the C-suite in the corporate world. But in nonprofits, these are often developed without formal training, without formal mentorship programs, or even recognition. Let's begin to challenge that and to change that narrative. Nonprofit leaders juggle multiple stakeholder demands, often work with limited resources. Heck, one day you're strategizing a 3-year plan. The next, you're resolving a staff issue. And then the next, you're pitching to a donor. Wait, who am I kidding? That's all in a day's work, right? We can't talk about leadership without talking about what happens when it walks out the door. And it's walking at a high rate. It's walking. High turnover is not just an HR issue. It's a mission issue. When leaders are underpaid, overworked, and under-recognized, they burn out. And when they leave, it takes time, money, and momentum with them. It goes out the door. We lose donor relationships, we lose program consistency, and we lose trust, both internally and externally. It's a domino effect. It hurts our teams, it hurts our communities, and ultimately it hurts the people that we're serving. Undercompensation doesn't just show up in a paycheck. It shows up in what we can no longer build, what we can no longer lead, and what we can no longer sustain. And that is a cost that we cannot afford. Institutional knowledge walks out that door when that person leaves. Nearly 45% of nonprofit leaders are considering leaving their role within 2 years. Think about that. 45%. That's nearly half of the people. 72% of nonprofit employees report experiencing burnout and citing workload and lack of support. 56% of nonprofits report difficulty filling leadership roles due to salary expectations and sector stigma. Organizations with higher turnover are 27% less likely to meet program outcomes or fundraising goals. And the fundraising goals don't go away, and those program goals don't go away. They stay, and they get higher, and they get more demanding. Every leadership departure results in a loss of context, relationships, and momentum, especially and probably more significantly in smaller to mid-sized organizations. Many nonprofits are expected to deliver transformational results while working with minimal resources. That's a cultural narrative that passion should replace pay. But passion doesn't pay for staff training, doesn't pay the rent, and it surely doesn't pay healthcare. Our workforce is in crisis. Burnout is real and burnout is rampant. Staff shortages are common, and the expectation is to deliver hasn't slowed down. It's a recipe for exhaustion, and it takes a toll on our leadership. 70% report hiring challenges due to low pay and burnout. I've said it a couple of times already, but this isn't hard work. It is hard work. These are the same skills that got you in the C-suite in the corporate world. But in nonprofits, we often have to develop them without formal training, formal mentorship, or recognition. Nonprofit leaders are the decision makers. We are the change agents, and we are the system navigators. These are the executive competencies, and we are strategic planners. Let's jump right in. Strategic vision is often more complex in for-profit settings due to than it is in for-profit settings, due to changing grants, donor priorities, and community dynamics. Here's my favorite. You write a 3-year grant, but wait, in year 1.5, the grant changes and half your funding has been reallocated. That's happened. Who's that happened to? Raise your hand, right? Funding cycles, political shifts. We're currently experiencing that. There's like a $300 billion potential loss in grants, right? Donor priorities change overnight. We are currently seeing that right now. And many of us are living that day to day. How about flexibility and versatility? A nonprofit leader builds a 5-year plan to reduce homelessness. They coordinate and collaborate with city housing, mental health professionals, and a workforce partner. Year 3, that major grant is restructured by the state. The plan doesn't collapse, it evolves. That is strategic leadership. That is working together. That's what nonprofit leaders lead with. That's working together. That's where we have to lead from the front. So first and foremost, who are the 7% of nonprofit executives that have all the resources that they need? Because I want to be them. I want to have all that I need to deliver the mission. Let's call this what it is. It's financial acrobats walking on a tightrope each month. We've got restricted program funds, general operating grants, donor designations, maybe some earned income if you're lucky. And somehow you're keeping the lights on, you pay the staff, and your outcomes are flowing. That's not luck. That's leadership. And then you've got sweet Mr. Jones. He just gave you $5,000 to buy chocolate ice cream for the summer social on August 9th. If only Mr. Jones understood the importance of unrestricted funds, not restricted. People outside the sector love to say, nonprofits should be run more like a business. Here's the thing. We already are. In fact, we're doing it better because we do it with tighter margins, higher accountability, and more people watching our every move. We manage financials under scrutiny that would make some CEOs sweat a little. You can explain variances, forecast shortfalls, and stretch a $100,000 grant across 4 counties, 3 staff, and a dozen partners, all while still staying compliant. That's not budgeting. That's mission-aligned financial strategy. Let's not forget that operational piece where you're asked to run lean teams, deliver frontline services, and handle crises. And we report quarterly outcomes. You're not just managing money, you're leading a mission with precision and heart. All of that takes skill, it takes strategy, and it most definitely deserves recognition. Whoa, stakeholder engagement and relationship building. It is all about relationships, right? Nonprofit leaders spend a large portion of their time building and maintaining relationships, often more delicate than for-profit sales, because these relationships are mission-driven. They're not just transactional. Let's talk about what doesn't fit neatly into that org chart. It's stakeholder engagement. Nonprofit leaders are constantly managing this web of relationships. Funders with different priorities, board members with personal agendas, clients with urgent needs, and staff, they're doing life-changing work, usually underpaid and stretched pretty thin. These clients, in the transactional sense, they're partners in the mission, and that means the stakes are higher. You're not selling a project. It's usually a program they're investing in. You're protecting trust. You're negotiating for impact. You're aligning values. Sometimes you're managing egos. You're keeping people connected to the why, even when the how gets a little bit messy. And unlike in the corporate world, your funder doesn't just want a report, they want a relationship. That means cultivating, updating, stewarding, listening, sometimes disagreeing without blowing up the whole mission. This is high stakes management. It's emotional labor. It's diplomacy, it's stewardship, and sometimes it gets messy. Let's pause for a second and think about all that we have pulled off. In the first few weeks of the pandemic, when the entire world was shutting down, nonprofit leaders, we didn't wait. We pivoted. We adapted. We showed up. Most organizations didn't have a remote work plan, but suddenly we were running support groups on Zoom, doing no contact food delivery, setting up emergency funds, and applying for PPP loans. Me at midnight. We innovated out of necessity, but we also laid the foundation for lasting change. We didn't just survive COVID. We evolved. We learned. We learned how to engage digitally. We made some mistakes for sure, but we learned from them. We formed new coalitions. We formed partnerships that we didn't even know we needed to form. We built resilience right into our operating models. That's not just agility. That's transformational leadership. That's what makes nonprofit professionals so powerful. And it proves that when we say we are strategic and adaptable and resilient, we're not just making a case. We're stating facts. We continuously innovate to keep the mission alive. 83% of nonprofit leaders reported adapting the program within the first 60 days of the pandemic. 69% of small to mid-level nonprofits developed new partnerships or services to meet emerging needs. And only 19% of nonprofit organizations had a pre-existing remote work plan prior to March of 2020. 19%. That's it. Now I bet you the greater majority do. All right, let's talk about wages. But wait, there's more. If you take just one thing away from this particular slide, let it be this. Nonprofit leaders are not just being undervalued. It's two directions if you're women. So women, take this away. First, across the board, from our corporate peers, we are undervalued. But hold on, what is going on with marketing managers in nonprofit earning nearly 18% less than similar roles in a for-profit organization? What's up with that? But let's talk about this gender disparity. It's very interesting. So by now, gender makes up 69% of all staff in nonprofits, which is very interesting. It's women, 69%. Did I say that? Are women. They're still being paid less for the same roles, but especially at the top, there's $100,000 difference, which is very interesting to me, and I'm not sure why that is. It's not because women aren't qualified or capable or leading at the highest levels. It's because the system is still built to favor the status quo, even in a sector that preaches equity. Interesting. We can't talk about leadership without calling out those gaps clearly, publicly, and often. Because we're not just here to name the problem, we're here to shift it and to make changes. The truth is, our sector cannot afford to lose its best talent. And it is, and it will continue to if we don't start paying leaders what they're worth. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the moment that you've been waiting for, the meat and potatoes. What can you do for this is now, well, what you can do for this is now the so what, right? Like I gave you the now what. So here's the so what, right? It's like I gave you the now what, so here's the so what. So first things first. For crying in the kitchen sink, can we please describe our leadership with results, not with our tax status? Please, 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 please. Lead with what you've done, not with how you file your taxes. I do not lead with the fact that I am like married with children. I don't lead with that. You lead teams, you manage budgets, you build partnerships, you've driven strategy, and you've done it all under pressure. Focus on your skills, your education, your experience, rather than your tax status. Don't apologize for being from the nonprofit sector. Own it. It's amazing. You are doing great things. You are working in the nonprofit sector, doing great and wonderful things. Shift the mindset, especially your own. The first barrier that we always have to overcome is often internal, right? Stop starting sentences with I only blank, blank, blank. You didn't only do anything. You led. You built. You solved. You did. The nonprofit sector didn't make you less qualified. It made you battle tested, battle ready. It made you far more resilient. Your competencies are transferable. Period. The end. That is a complete sentence. Your competencies are transferable. Strategic planning, stakeholder engagement, crisis leadership, data interpretation, resource management, those are universal. And ladies and gentlemen, you do those every day. You speak the language of any boardroom, foundation, or cross-sector partner. You already do it every day. Frame your experience in terms of impact, efficiency, and outcomes. Tech investments, those are part of the experience in terms of impact. Efficiencies and outcomes. Many nonprofit leaders have adapted to CRMs, virtual service delivery, donor databases, and AI for grant writing, and so much more. Did you all catch the AI presentation at Elevate? If you didn't, get with the Alliance. You can still see it. It was amazing. That's not just survival, it's digital leadership. You're not behind the curve. You've been innovating on a budget all along. That takes skill. Dismantle sector-based value judgment. The idea that corporate equals competent and nonprofit equals hard work is outdated and lazy. Nonprofit leadership is just as demanding, and often more so, because you're managing people, pressure, and purpose. Our sector's leaders deserve to be seen as strategic, skilled, and worthy of investment. You didn't choose this sector because it was easy. You chose it because you lead with purpose. But purpose and compensation are not mutually exclusive. It's time to stop playing small. Your worth is not defined by what? Your tax status. It is defined, however, by your impact. Those I statements. I did, I am, I can, right? That, my friends, is what is priceless. So let's shift that compensation conversation. And let's be real. Most boards really do want to do the right thing, but they're really often working with an outdated mindset, with misinformation, or really sort of no frame of reference at all. So how do you help them? What do? You give them information. You provide them with all of the information, right? You give them some benchmarking. Start with hard numbers. Pull salary data from your area, right? Look at GuideStar, Nonprofit Times, Candid. Compare organizational size, your role, your region, right? So you're pulling data from your area. So you're getting good information on your role in your area. The data is there. You just have to bring it to the table. Transparency. Don't just fight for your salary. Push your organization to adopt a compensation philosophy. That's a statement that outlines how and why salaries are set. It builds trust and it removes mystery and supports fairness across the organization. Emphasize the outcomes compensation should reflect what you've achieved, not just what you manage. Tie your value to metrics, program growth, donor retention, service delivery, and community impact. That's what boards do understand. Educate the board. Many board members come from the corporate world or from industries where pay decisions are handled behind the scenes. Give them a quick training. Send them sector reports or walk them through what restricted funding really means. Remember Mr. Jones and his chocolate ice cream? It happens more, it happens more often than not. Let them know what it really means when people give you restricted funds. Lastly, context is key. Don't assume they know the realities of nonprofit leadership. You've got to paint the picture. How many staff you supervise, budgets that you manage, crises that you've navigated. How many grants have you secured? Help them see what your role really is. Executive level leadership. Let them know. Do they know? If they don't, they should. Data is your friend in all of these conversations. The more data, the more information, the more armed you are. And it's not a us versus them arming. It's a more information gives you more information, right? And you're better equipped. Data is your friend. This isn't about This isn't about arming up and I deserve this. It's about justifying value. Start with benchmarking. GuideStar and Nonprofit Times are great places and they break it down by budget size, which is crucial, right? You cannot base a salary on $1 million budget when you're at a small little baby nonprofit. You can't do that. Then layer in leadership and ROI. Your board doesn't need a rant. They need evidence. So walk in with numbers. Here's what others are paid at the same level organization. Here's the budget I manage. Here's the outcomes that I've delivered. You're not asking for charity. You're presenting a business case. It often helps to prepare a one-pager. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what the industry standard is, and here's the value that I've created. Interestingly, in 2022, Third Plateau told us that for every $1 that was invested in leadership, organizations saw a $3 to $5 return. All right, train your board on compensation standards. Boards can't lead on what they don't understand, so bring them along. Show them how compensation connects to retention. Show them how top funders are looking for leadership sustainability, not just program outcomes. Then build the structure with them. Create that formal review process and that compensation philosophy that I talked about. So the next leader doesn't have to start from scratch. Advocate for today and for tomorrow's leaders. This isn't just about your pay. It's about creating systems of fairness in your organization. That's leadership. We may not make changes overnight, right? We may not make a change today, but we're making inroads for changes in the future. And that's super important. That's leadership. I'm not here to hype you up and send you back in the same silence. I want you to challenge you to do something. Do something with what you've heard today. Speak up, document your impact, ask the questions, send the email, print your resume, whatever your next move is, make it bold. You are the strategy. You are the story. You are the one. They've been underestimating you. So go make them see it. Make a list of the top 5 leadership moves that you have made in the last year. Own your impact. No more shrinking. Frame it. Only 38% of nonprofits review the executive director compensation annually. What if you're not the executive director? When's the last time your compensation was reviewed? Look at that. Schedule that conversation with your board, your executive director, or yourself. Speak the truth about your value. Remember, you are the strategy. You are the story. You are the one that they have been underestimating. So again, go make them see it. And questions and answers. And key takeaways. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is the moment that you've been waiting for. This is the time where we're going to shift the mic. We've covered a lot, and I've shared a lot of data, strategy, lived experiences, maybe said a few things that have you thinking. But you haven't had the space to say it out loud. So let's use this time for questions, but also for truth telling. What's resonated with you? Maybe what's stung a little? What's something you've been wanting to say on your own, but didn't know how? And listen, there's no judgment here. This is a safe space where we can be brave, not perfect. You don't have to have the right words. You just have to be willing to show up for yourself.
Well, thank you, Barb, for everything that you shared. This was great. We did get a few questions in the chat, and if you do have other questions that you would like to filter to the chat, please feel free to do so. If you would like to ask Barb questions directly, raise your hand and I can unmute you. But while we get those questions gearing up from the audience, just a reminder that we are recording this and we are going to send out the recording within the next little bit of time. So be on the lookout for that. And also the Association of CMPs hosts events like this throughout the year. So just check our upcoming events. A link will be posted in the chat. And without that, after that, I'll start with 2 questions that we have. So the first question that we have from the chat is, why do you think nonprofit wages are so below average? Is it because of budget? And I know you touched a little bit on that, but perhaps if there's anything else.
So I think it is a combination of budgets and a combination of, I think it goes back to that sort of that old, it's heart work and it's charity work. And it's, I think it's sort of those two combined, right? And between the two, I think that we haven't in the past done a really good job of advocating for ourselves and for our worth. And I didn't have the time today to talk about this, but how many people have written a grant and realized that you can't put salary into your grant, right? Because no one wants to pay salaries in a grant, right? You can't really pay people if you can't get it in your grant and you're trying to run a program without the ability to pay folks. It's hard.
Very true, very true. All right, we have another question. So this question mentions that they want to know how to advocate for employees. And the situation that they gave was that due to budget cuts, a whole team was cut and others were made to pick up the slack. So how do they advocate for their fellow employees?
That is so hard. And it is sort of it's difficult because you are sort of shrinking in the organization and it has to get done. And it is where that burnout takes place, right? And that's where you start to have to look at what programs you can sort of do without and what programs. If you're going to cut people, you have to start looking at programs can sort of go away, and which is always difficult because programs are near and dear to people. But you have to realistically look at the staff that you do have. You have to advocate for that staff that you do have because they've already eliminated this other staff. So you have to advocate for the staff that you do have and make sure that you're not going to lose that staff by burning them out and overworking them and not advocating for them. So that's where you sort of have to like shelter them and talk about, we're not going to burn out these guys. So what can we eliminate and what can we do without?
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. And then we have one more additional question. Before I get to that question, do know that people are in the chat saying, thank you so much. They resonated with this. They completely understand. Thank you for this insight. Because I know you can't see the chat, but I just wanted to share that before the next.
Before I forget, I just put up my last slide. If you want to zap that QR code, you'll join my like happy little list, and I will keep you update on all the great things that are happening at Another Point of View with Barb.
So please scan the QR code so you can stay connected with Barb.
Yes.
All right, if anybody has any other questions, I think we have maybe two more. We probably have about time just for two more. So one of our other questions is, what tips do you have for securing data for comparable wages?
I'm sorry, say that again. Sorry.
So it's actually a three-part question. So
okay.
the first part of the question is comparing your compensation. When it comes to comparing your compensation to that of the for-profit sector, what tips do you have for securing data for comparable wages? So I guess, how do you best compare wages when you look at the for-profit sector?
So I'm going to go back a couple of slides, and that's where you're going to pull like those GuideStar reports, and you're going to pull GuideStar Nonprofit Times, and they are going to pull based on your sector where you are and by your budget size, right? So it's going to give you not your sector, but your area and your budget size. So it'll give you those comparable salaries. And if you're comparing them to sort of corporate for-profit organizations, you're not going to get a really good comparison, right? They're always going to be skewed. They're always going to make, not always, but the majority of the time, they're going to make more money than your nonprofit sector is making. So when you're comparing the two of them, it's good to sort of bring in that data to your folks, but oftentimes it's that huge disparity between the two.
Got it. Okay, so the last two questions that we have, what if additional salary isn't possible due to budget constraints? Should we ask for additional time off, etc.?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I think it's important if you can't make changes within the budget, right? If you're really stuck there, then you have to build a robust package for your people, right? So that's where you have to get creative, and that's where you offer, I don't know, additional days off. You offer like Fridays off, or you offer, I worked for a nonprofit out in New York City where we did not work Fridays from Memorial Day to Labor Day, right? So that was part of our benefits package because they couldn't build it into the budget to pay people more. So you got Fridays off, but that's where you build different stuff into the budget. And you had a doctor's appointment for your kid. You didn't lose vacation time if you took your kid to the doctors, that sort of stuff. So you just build that in if you can't pay people more. Yep.
That's really good. I hope the person who asked that question is still on so they could get that answer. And with that being our last question, Barb, just thank you again for sharing your insight, your expertise. Thank you for taking the time to share this amazing information with us. And to close us out, just wanted to remind you all that we do have some links in the chat, so you can go ahead and click that to see our upcoming events. And if you would love to keep attending these live events, you can certainly feel free to support us. There'll be a link in the chat with that for ways to donate. And I believe that's, and if you have any more questions for us, if you have ideas about future sessions or just questions about becoming a CNP, feel free to email us at cnpcredential@nla1.org. Other than that, have an amazing rest of your day.